unmute yourself, just shout out. Don't worry about interrupting me in mid-flow. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but my only request is that try and make the questions relate to the topic. I've had a couple of situations where people go off in all sorts of tangents and it takes up a little bit of time. So in terms of the presentation, the reason that I've packaged this up is, for me, this is a universal topic. Doesn't matter what age and stage that you work at, your players are always trying to move the opponent. It's one of the reasons that tennis is so demanding, is not just the skills you need on the ball, but it's the fact that the demands of the movement are such that it really tests not just the technical skills, but your tactical awareness, your mental ability to stay on task or be processed or be clear in your thought process. So it's something that fits everyone. I'm aiming it, if I'm honest, at more like a competition player level. But as I've said already, please jump in and ask for any clarifications on maybe wording or what I mean exactly by certain things. I'm more than happy to go with that. So let's jump in. First of all, I've missed a slide there. Sorry. There was an objective slide that's disappeared somewhere, but essentially the way this is going to work is that I will unpack these principles. I will then unpack the 7 different ways, and then we'll go into the section where we're really focusing on how you break down the training of not the specific in each one, but how you break down training in general, and then you could apply the principles of each of the 7 within that. So you'll have a lot of information to go away with and actually chew up any drill of any kind of topic, but of course we're focusing on the different ways of moving. So in terms of principles of movement, this might sound overly simplistic, but for me, it's important that we clarify, in my mind, exactly when someone is moving the opponent. So of course, the different ways you can move your opponent is laterally, diagonally backwards, diagonally forwards, or straight up and back. But the key thing for me is to have some sort of minimum level of when you're moving the opponent. So for me, you're not moving them laterally unless they're standing on the outside thirds of the court, striking the ball from there. We'll come to it a little bit later on, but you'll hear me talk about, my definitions of what a cross-court ball is. But when I think back to when I trained, when I was a teenager, I was unfortunately one of these cantankerous teenagers that questioned the coaches. And I remember playing cross-court singles, and someone would hit the ball just 1 foot into the cross court. And I would say, that's not even making me move. It's actually making me hit on the inside of the ball. So for me, we have to have these kind of minimum standards so that we raise the bar for our players when they're on the court. We don't want them thinking, oh, that's a good shot, when the reality is it's actually gone straight into their hitting zone. In terms of the diagonals and the up and back, it's very simple. If we think of everyone has their default rally zone, whatever distance that is from the baseline, you are moving your opponent when you push them backwards out of that zone into a defensive zone, or bringing them forwards deliberately, hopefully in a low ball, to take them out of that zone. So really, if you think about those two combined, we're trying to use an analogy of be like the dog with the toy. When you're trying to rug it out of its mouth, you try and go in all sorts of different directions and push and pull your opponent and take them out of their comfort zone to force them to be agile. So agility is a skill that I think doesn't get enough spotlight put on it. Is that, we talk a lot about speed, but the ability to change direction is the thing that makes someone a great mover on a tennis court, and not just someone who's a fast runner. We always train these things in patterns. So of course, there might be times where I isolate a shot and repeat it to get volume on the skill, but we're always looking to train these principles in patterns: the shot before to set it up, the shot of, the shot after, etc., etc. Whenever possible and appropriate, we'll connect it to the serve and return, because we all know the importance of those 2 shots. And we would, over time, look to train our players how to play against players that like to do that. So if you think of it in this simple sense, if I know I play against somebody who likes to dominate from the middle, and make me move side to side, how can I play against someone like that to stop them doing what they want to do? It could also be I have to train my players how to play against someone who just does it. So for example, if somebody is serving huge, then there's maybe limits to what I can do to stop them dominating from the middle on ball 3. But what I could do is train my players how to maybe, once they are moving me from one side to the other, the next ball I hit stops them maintaining that dominating the middle field. So those are the principles that I wanted to start with to kind of set the scene. So in terms of the 7 ways, I've got examples, just a visual example here with a few principles behind it. And then I've got video examples taken primarily from the girls' Tarbes final of 2020, which was between a 12-year-old called Brenda Fruitova and a 13-year-old called Clairvy Ongonyu from the USA. Fantastic match, 3-set match, and I chopped it up and was looking for all the 7 different ways. There's some that came out heaps, and there's some that came out just 1 or 2 times. When there's a fewer examples, I've gone to the Pro Tour to kind of take some examples just to show that it does happen more often there. So number 1, dominate the middle. As I kind of just described a second ago, this is your player here. Hopefully you can see my cursor. They are very simply from the middle third of the court, primarily with their forehand, really just moving the opponent side to side. It's not like they're doing it 10, 11, 12 shots in a row in a point, but the training, you know, we have to kind of get the volume in this area. So we're trying to get that ball into that outside third. The mentality I want players to have is what I would call an attack, attack, attack mentality. So we're not looking for the Delpo sledgehammer forehand that has to be hit a one-shot wonder, if you like. If you think of teenage players, especially young boys, quite often they can be in a rush. They think they need to win the point, whereas what I like to try and get the players to do is almost take a perverse pleasure in seeing the opponent run. It's almost like, if you use the analogy of my sports watch, or you get the iPhones now that can track the steps. It's like you play a point, and I want to see how many steps your opponent can take in between the points. And the final thing to add in there is that the players, they can play with margin doing this. They don't have to hit the ball 10 centimeters over the net flat as a pancake. They can shape the ball into the corners. They could even do a steeper arc into the corners to push them diagonally backwards as well. They could even use the slice backhand to kind of really keep the ball low and wide. And there's no reason why they couldn't play a kind of a slice forehand. It's just not trained as much. But logically, there's no reason why they can't do it also there. So the clip I'm going to show you shows a few examples of that, starting with the serve and then the next ball dominating the middle, then the return, and then some in-point play. I suppose from your point of view, what I want you to look at is our temptation is to look at the person dominating, but what I would like you to look at is also, or have one eye on, the amount of movement that the player is having to do side to side. Yeah, so keep an eye on that. We've got Brenda here, Clairvy at the top here.
Voilà. Confiance un petit peu de son adversaire. Donc,
ouais, la première.
des placements à voir. Et voilà, même, regardez, même cette attaque, elle revient, elle est obligée.
Ouais, là, le
Là, non, là, c'est...
ouais, ça y est.
So it's interesting. I've watched this match so many times. I was actually at the event, and I've watched it God knows how many times since. Excuse me. It's interesting when I tagged this match, because all the major kind of wow moments, the highlight reel, if you like, Most of them were coming from Clervy, but it was Brenda that won the match. So you could see the 2 or 3 examples from Brenda. She was very much more shaping the ball into the corners and systematically breaking down Clervy, whereas Clervy was actually able to take the racket out of the opponent's hands. Now, we could look at that in 2 ways and think, right, okay, well, we want Clervy to be more like Brenda, or we could say we want Brenda to be more like Clervy. My thoughts on it, just if it's of any interest, is that my feeling, having watched this match so many times, is that once Clervy really finds her range, she will be one of these players that actually has the ability to take the opponent's racket out of their hands. Whereas Brenda's going to have to work hard to be a little bit more aggressive, but both fantastic players. But I think it's worth saying those kind of things while we're on. So if we move to number 2, is very simply changing direction. And this, this is a massively obvious one, but it's massively important. If we think of our players' ability to change direction in different situations, it can quite often be a pivotal skill that they have. If you reflect on some of your younger players, maybe like 12 and under players, they probably either change direction too soon, or they change direction when it's only very obvious. So if you think of the skill of changing direction, not just the tactical aspect that we're talking about here, it's a great thing to focus on with your players at any age and stage. And if I think back to my observations of when Andy went on that amazing run in 2016, for me as an outsider looking in, that was something that visually looked different. That from that kind of May, June time onwards, it was like he was changing direction more, and he was also changing direction when it was less obvious that he should. Even when he was moving diagonally backwards on his backhand, sometimes changing direction line. And it just really throws the opponent's ability to kind of settle in the point. So it's a hugely important skill to have. So in terms of the principles on the screen, we talk about when we change direction and how. So typically what I would look for in my players, or what you would look for in your players, is we want them to really look for an opportunity to change when the last shot has opened up the court. We want them to look to change when the opponent has not recovered sufficiently. We want them to look to change when the shot allows them to attack. So it should be a short ball, maybe a ball that just floats or sits up. It has lack of speed or spin or penetration in general. We also want them to, as I kind of touched on there, almost like this other element, which I talk about almost like in a Del Potro sense, is like when he won the US Open against Federer, he was redefining percentage tennis at that point, because there were times, if you paused it on the MP4 or DVD, if you said, where's he going to go? You would have to say, well, the percentage option is he should go cross court. He was almost like 4 or 5 meters back, 2-3 meters off the court, and he was hitting winners down the line. So of course you can change direction when you want to, but as long as you've got the skill and the ability to change the rhythm, whether that be increase speed or change the shape to slow the ball down and maybe increase the ball spin. In terms of how, I've just talked about the shape there, but going back to Brenda, the rally ball shape, you can change direction like that. Again, I always think of what the trends are in young players that are developing. And there's a very big trend that when players change direction, they think that they have to increase the speed as well. You could simply shape a ball cross court, shape a ball down the line, and the added benefit of shaping it is it pushes them diagonally backwards. Whereas if you hit it hard and flat, they just go laterally across the court. If they've got good hand skills, they can just counterpunch very easily on that ball, but it's very difficult to counterpunch a ball that sits up. So I would add that quality arc ball. The reason I put moon ball with a question mark is, personally, I don't use those words with junior players because most people have a negative connotation when they think of moon baller. In Scotland, I don't know if it's the same in Wales, but we call them hackers, or the kids call them hackers. I don't call them that. So they talk about moon ballers in a negative way. So why would I try and encourage a player to practice something that they consider as a negative? So I talk about the quality arc ball, and for me, the easiest way to do it is put them in a certain court position, arc the ball down the line, like kind of a really steep arc with heaps of spin, and say, go try and do something with that ball. If you put them in those situations, it makes them realize, God, if I could do that to my opponents, that would be awful for them. So I really work on that, especially the forehand to the backhand down the line. Of course, attack ball, which is the one they want to do, which is a lower trajectory, adding pace, and the early ball, which is really using the speed of the opponent and again having a shallower trajectory to do that. Excuse me. We could change direction with the slice. You'll see occasionally on the Pro Tour someone play a slice backhand down the line winner. Yeah, so the reason is that it's the low percentage option. The opponent wasn't anticipating it at all. It upsets their split step kind of rhythm and balance, and they don't even move for it. It happens a few times if you look out for that when you're watching on the TV. Excuse me. And you can also, I think, develop the skills to do it on the forehand. It's not necessarily common, but the one thing I would say to all of you is that if you use the logic of most players use their forehand, which they might consider their strength, into the opponent's backhand, which they might consider the opponent's weakness. The problem with that is if you train that over and over and over and over, they have zero experience of defending on their forehand. Yeah, and I'm still amazed if I go to like Tennis Europe events or ITF junior events, and even on the tour, how many times it would be quite obvious that the player's weakness is actually to be attacked into their strength. Yeah, a strength is only it's only in the attack phase that is the strength. They don't have it on the defense phase. So I think we almost have a duty to make sure our players practice that forehand slice defense as well. But then those skills can transfer into other areas. I watched Seb Corda the other night being under pressure on his forehand and just knifing it low, short up the middle of the court, and then Cam Norrie struggled to control the next ball and missed it. So these skills come out in different situations as well. So it's very obvious that there are tons of examples from the clip, because girls tend to change direction a lot more because they hit lower trajectory. They want to expose the movement of the opponent. So we've got a few examples here.
Rêver ici à Tarbes avec ces deux jeunes filles. Clarisse qui est une petite Serena Williams, je dirais, avec un tennis très puissant, très belle technique, même si elle est puissante, de physique pour bien ajuster.
It's worth saying here the differential between the last one is it's where they change direction from. So now they'll be changing on the outside thirds of the court. So watch how they set it up and then how they change direction.
Ouais, parfait. Quelle puissance.
C'est volé. Aïe, 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 là, elle monte mal.
Oh, oh là 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 là, la
Okay, so again, you see Brenda very much more systematically building the play. Personally, I prefer this because I'm 5'9" and couldn't hit my way out of a wet paper bag, so I can empathize with that way a lot more because that's the way I used to have to play myself. It's more like manipulate the opponent, whereas Clervy has the ability to, take the racket out of Brenda's hands. I'd have to be mindful of that as a coach, that I don't superimpose my preference onto the players as well. So number 3 is win the cross-court battle. So for me, the definition of this is when there are more than 3 or more shots in a row cross-court. That's when almost my eyes kind of go, okay, this is interesting. How are they actually building the point within the cross-court? So this is where I can clarify what my minimum cross-court ball, and this is just my opinion, but the reason I do it is to raise the bar within a training environment. So for me, a ball can be considered cross-court if it passes through this junction or near the junction of the baseline and the singles line. So essentially you're making the opponent swing the racket near the singles line. It doesn't have to be bang in line, but it's just a guide. The reason being that I'm number one, trying to force the opponent to put the brakes on, to kind of really try and put them in that gray zone, if you like, where they might be thinking, can I get behind this ball and load, or do I have to hit maybe an athletic hop or on a shuffle step or a crossover step, or maybe even on the run? You're kind of making them have a decision to make there. The second reason is that I want to really challenge their, what I would call their 3-step stride. So if you think of the way a player moves, hopefully if I do this with my hands, because you can't see my feet, so I'm in one of those moments, if these were my feet, so you just have to stay with me. If I was facing you on the court, the first thing I do when you hit me wide is I step out with my foot. So I step out and then I cross over and then I load on the outside foot. That is universally the standard 3-step pattern that players will do to move laterally on forehand and backhand. Step out, cross over, step out. Yeah. Now, if you take this premise of, if I can do that walking and actually cover a reasonable distance, if I go at 30% of my athleticism, I can actually cover a good chunk more. If I go 60%, a good chunk more, and so on. I would like my players to be able to, when they hit a cross-court ball, make the opponent take a 3-step stride at 80 to 90 or 100% of their athleticism. Yeah, so you get players that they hit cross-court, but the opponent could almost walk out behind the ball to get it. We want to force them to use their athleticism. We want them to perversely, again, enjoy this war of attrition. It doesn't have to be 10, 12 shots in a row. Boys will stay in this war of attrition a lot more. There's a couple of reasons for that. Maybe we can speak about at the end. So if you're asking yourself the question, why do girls change direction more? Why do boys stay in the cross court more? Park that to the end and we can maybe speak about it there. And ultimately, long term, I suppose with any of these tactics, I want to build a belief, a genuine innate belief in my player that they can out-rally, outthink, and outmaneuver the opponent. So that if you think of players that typically love that mindset, so Andy is one. He loves to kind of almost takes pleasure in seeing the opponent running around, changing direction. If you think of Rafa, the same thing. If you think of Halep, the same thing. She loves seeing the opponent moving side to side, changing direction, and so on. So a couple of examples.
Elle est belle. Non.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it there. That was the only 2 examples for the entire 3-set match of an unbelievable world-class under-14 match in girls. That was the only 2 examples of when they hit 3 shots in a row or more in the entire match. So I went on, and literally 5 minutes after editing that, the first clips I saw were the montage of the Battle of the Brits, and I saw this. So you can really sense more the cat and mouse mentality, in that cross-court ball, where they're really trying to look for opportunities to put the opponent in awkward positions. So for me, you can have so much fun in squad training with the battle of winning the battle in the cross-court. it would lead to this, which is number 4, opening up the courts. So just like we had the definition for the cross-court ball, I have 3 definitions or descriptors, if you like, for different angles. So if this long angle is the red line here, where it crosses roughly around the 3/4 court, you could think of the junction of the orange baseline. We've got the orange line here, which is more a short angle, which crosses near the corner, and then an extreme angle here. Now, the reason that I use these are purely for quick references for the player. So when you work with your players, you can quickly talk about, you know, where did that one go? It was there. What could you have done? Or you could have done the long angle. You went cross court. Maybe they try a short angle, but they hit it too flat and it goes in the tram line. So you say, right, if you want to hit the short angle, you need to increase the spin. If you want to hit the extreme angle, you need to be much more soft with the ball. In terms of the considerations, for me, this is a big one, and it starts to talk about the 2 sides of the coin. This one here about they must understand the impact their shots had. Now, this, you know yourself, if you are working with young players, quite often they are playing in a bubble in their own head. They're not seeing what's down the other end of the court. It's almost, it could be a blanket covering the net and it wouldn't make a difference. Yeah, they are so playing tennis in their head. We want our players as early as possible to look up and absorb the information that's happening down the other end of the court, because everything they need is staring them right in the face. Yeah, all the information they need, good and bad, is staring them right in the face. So if, for example, if you follow my cursor here, someone could move me from here to here, but I'm not under real time pressure. Now, of course, I could now counter with a long angle, a short angle. I could slam it line. I could even slam it up the middle. So I need to understand, or sorry, you need to understand the impact your shots had on me, so you can start to anticipate what could happen. And it might be you need to be ready to run. Yeah, it could be that you need to be ready to change the direction on your next shot. Yeah, and this is a big thing. You'll see from the clips in a second. You do not need an angle to hit an angle. You'll see several examples here where Clervy hits short and long angles easily from the middle of the court. There's no logic in that principle in terms of pure geometry. If you got a geometrist or a mathematician to say, in tennis, you can only hit an angle from an angle, they would look at it and go, well, there's no logic in that at all. There's certainly no truth, because I can hit from here to here. It's just a different angle. It doesn't visually look as obvious, but it can still be done. So I'll show you a few examples. So you'll see long angle, sorry, cross court, long angle from the middle, long angle from the middle, short angle, another short angle from the middle, opened up the court from the middle. Trace a great angle of the angle, real extreme angle. Now she's got her runners on. She has to run side to side. Another great example on the return. Yeah. So again, imagine your players having the ability to do a short or extreme angle on a second serve return. Doesn't have to always be the big, heavy sledgehammer that they're going for. Option 5, so wrong foot the opponent. So if you think of the logic of this, you know, if you're getting your players to move side to side, you're going to have opportunities to then throw in a variation of wrong footing. Now, this is, don't get too hung up on these rules. I've done this a couple of times now and people are like overthinking this. This is just a reframe of an old school rule. So typically, old school rule is you look to wrong foot faster players and you make slow players run. My updated version is wrong foot great movers and do what you bloody well like against bad movers. So there's no reason why you can't wrong foot a bad mover. The reason I put this great mover in, I alluded to it earlier about the agility, is that if someone is fast, quite often if they're under duress, they will recover very, very fast. So you make them change direction. I've got one great example of Rafa doing it to Novak. But the key thing in that example is, and I watched the match that the example's from, is he used it as a variation, not a pattern. And that's why Novak falls over, because he was sprinting to what Rafa had done previously in the match, and Rafa puts the ball back behind him. Again, just like the opening the court, our players need to understand the impact of the shot before, so that they actually can start to read the recovery and then know whether it would be a good option, whether to go to the other side. Typically young players, and again, so apologies for boys here, but boys are quite impatient with this, and they try and do it as the smart arse answer, and they tend to do it over and over. It's not a variation if you do it over and over, and eventually the opponent realizes and they don't have to move at all, they just stand where they are. And the reason I put this one in here is that it can also be impactful when it's done as the low percentage option, but again, please make sure they only do it as the variation. The clip that you'll see now with Clervy doing it, Brenda doing it to Clervy, you'll see Clervy clap the shot because it was unexpected. So have a look. Yeah, have a look again and watch Clervy's reaction. So for me, this is a great definition because she literally gets wrong footed. Watch her split step timing, or not the timing, the way she is. She's just caught off guard. Here. She literally is caught off guard. She does a great split step, but she just can't push in the direction. It's tactically a low percentage option that won that point. Typically the percentage, not risky, it's not a risky shot, it's just a low percentage shot. Typically in the match, she was changing direction, and on that one, she went down the line. Have a look at the example here from Rafa against Novak. He's got him one side, he's got him the other side, he's sprinting, falls over. You know, have a look again. For me, it's like how much better an example of literally wrong footing someone to the point where their foot slides underneath them. Changes direction, dominates from the middle, and then wrong foots. And previously in that match, every time that Rafa was getting to the net in that position, he was just touching the ball for a drop shot. So it's again just a wrong footed Rafa big time there. Look at another example. Oh, sorry, it's the same one. I thought I had another one there. So, so number 6, X pattern. So it's important I clarify this because you'll have maybe heard of the Spanish drill where you do an X pattern. You could do it with a hand feed or a basket feed, but you push them backwards diagonally, you bring them in diagonal, you push them back, and then you bring them diagonal. In a match court, typically, it only happens like half of the X. So you'll either see a player deliberately bring someone in and then push them back on the opposite diagonal, or you see them push them back and then bring them in. It could even be, and the examples I've got of Clervy doing it really well, is that she does 1/4 of the X. She does the short one to bring Brenda up the court, is ready to play the next one, but Brenda doesn't get the ball back. So for me, that's a great example, but it's definitely on a diagonal. It's not a drop shot, as you'll see later on. So typically it's easier to bring someone up the court with this low slice, but you can play the short or the softer angle ball to make them move diagonally into the tram lines. You can also, as I've said, shape the ball deep, then bring them in. It doesn't always have to be short, then deep. You have to be ready to play your second shot from multiple locations. And you'll see that in the pro examples I've got coming up, is that if I play my short angle to here and bring them up the court, it would be naive and silly of me to think that they're going to hit the ball straight back to me and then I shape it to there. They could make me play from multiple locations, and I need to be ready to have this mindset of, I don't care where you hit the ball, the next one is getting shaped or put into this corner here. I'm going to pull you here and push you there. I'm going to really have that mindset of, I don't care what you do, I'm going to do what I want to do. So have a look at the examples from the juniors.
chercher cette volée. En mettant l'intensité dans ses frappes, là c'est plus difficile.
Elle y est. Je comprends pas bien. Parce que là,
Si, parce que ça peut, le fait de casser. Ah, elle est belle.
ouais, elle est belle parce que
L'américaine aurait pu passer à la trappe.
So I don't class that as a drop shot because the second bounce, have a look maybe if I go to about here. I like, first of all, how Clervy is backing up what she's done. She's not hitting shots in isolation. She's clearly trained in patterns. But have a look at where the second bounces are.
Ah, elle est belle.
ouais, elle est belle parce que
That ball was half, 3/4 court.
L'américaine aurait pu passer à la trappe.
That one was about 2 feet behind the service box. Yeah, so it's not a drop shot, which typically I would think the second bounce needs to be clearly inside the box. Now I think it's this one I have. Oh, maybe it's this one. I've got the pro examples. So drop shot lob, again, is almost like an involvement. So again, you're deliberately bringing your opponent in. Now I've put in pass or lob here. It's interesting. I spoke with Louis recently, and we talked about he uses pass for lob, which I'd never heard of. And apparently, this is like in Canada, this is how they define it. That when you lob someone, it's in the same family as a pass. You're just passing over their head or passing around the sides for a typical passing shot. You can do whatever you like in terms of how you frame it, but the key thing is you're looking to play the drop shot, bring them up to the net, and look to pass or lob on the next ball. Just like every other shot, you need to read the impact of the shot. So you might attempt to play a drop shot, and it sits up, so you have to be ready to defend with a lob. You might have to play your pass from multiple locations. So you could say that typically we know that if someone drop shots me, I want to maybe drop shot them back or play a short angle back or nudge it deep or fake that I'm going to drive, then hit the drop, all these different variations. So as the player who plays the drop shot, I need to be ready to hit the shot, my next shot, from multiple locations. For me, this is the thing that catches out junior players. They play a good shot and they're not ready for the next ball. So they're hoping that it's going to be a winner, or they're hoping it's going to be like a really easy shot back. We need to train our players to have the mindset to be ready for the opponent's best. The different lobs could be, of course, an aggressive topspin lob. It could be a guided lob. So someone is putting you under the stretch and you just guide it over their head. Or it could be a blocked lob. So somebody plays with power and you just literally nudge it, counter over their head in a way. Examples here. So I love this drop shot. This is how sad I am. I've watched this drop shot so many times. But this is, if you look at the second bounce on this one. Second bounce is before the middle, like it's right up here. If you look at the execution and the racket work, I won't deviate into technique, but it's a different execution than the X pattern she played. Yeah, I could watch that all day, but that's how sad I am. Have a look and see Rafa. The reason, Novak, the reason I love this one is it is a perfect example of how, even though he is under stress, he knows what he wants to do with the next ball. The drop shot, stretch volley. He's still clear enough to know that he's going to play a lob. Nick will be outside third. That's that kind of counter ball, just guiding it over the head. Opposite, lob, and then drop shot. Again, if you look at even just that last one, look at the amount of running this dude is having to do. I think this is Seb Corda. So look, sprint, 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 boom. Sprint, 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 sprint. It's like, this is what we want our players to be taking pleasure in seeing at the other end of the court. They're putting their heart rate up to 170, 180, We know players get mentally fatigued in that stage. They get irritable. Their decision-making process is tougher. They start to physically fatigue. Technically, they struggle to repeat the same shots when they're in that situation. The irony being that when you feel like that, they start the points quicker the next time. So they're still at 150 beats per minute when they start the next point, when they should have taken the whole 20 seconds, etc. So this is the mindset I would love our players to have. So I'm going to take a minute or two there. Has anyone, that's the 7 different ways. We're now going to talk about the training. We're pretty much halfway through, so we are on track. Has anyone got any thoughts or questions based on what you've seen and heard so far? Ellie and I spoke about this being the tumbleweed moment. So she said that Kris might be the man to save the day. So any thoughts from you, Kris, or anyone?
Can you hear me firstly? Because I'm having terrible phone. Oh, you can. Great. I'm on my phone rather than my computer. But
okay.
Firstly, Kris, I mean, massive thanks for coming in today, and it's great to have so many visual examples from a current kind of top level junior match to look at all these things in. I suppose quick observation, the order you've presented them in, is that done on purpose in terms of perhaps how frequently these are seen, do you think? Or is there any order to it? Or?
Yeah, I think we could argue, go back and forth, that they might be jumbled up, but roughly there's a principle that dominate the middle happens typically the most after the serve. So in terms of in terms of sequential maybe rather than frequency. So if I serve big, the high percentage return is down the middle, so I have the opportunity to dominate from the middle. Change of direction, you could argue, should be the top one in pure frequency, because that's the one that happens the most. So they could be slightly shuffled around, but you see probably near the end it starts to play out a little bit more, that you're going to see fewer. Probably the one you will see the least in junior tennis is definitely a deliberate X pattern. So maybe that should be 7th. You know what I mean? But for me, those are kind of semantics, or just just real. It's preference. But the principle being, the big ones are dominate the middle, change direction, cross court battle. Looking to open up the court. Those 4 are your staple diet, if you like.
Were you you mentioned you only found 2 clips of sort of 3 shots in a row cross court in that girls match. Were you surprised at that, or were you actually expecting that to come out of that?
I was surprised it was that few, and this is a good point, because I was there. I watched the match, and I've watched the match maybe about 11 or 12 times. Sad git, but I'm always going back in to find different things. I've tagged it all up, so it's quicker for me to do it now. But when I first did it, I was really surprised, because it highlights, I suppose, Kris, that yourself, when you watch a match, you make up kind of what's the term that they use in it's like confirmation bias. Yeah, you've kind of got things that you like to look for, and those are the things that stand out to you, and you make these kind of blanket statements. When I first watched this match live, if you'd said to me, what were the rallies like, I would have said, relentless, cross courts, kind of trading with each other, the sparring, that was my first perception. When I tagged it and actually looked at it, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe there was maybe one other time where it was 3 shots, but I think they changed on the 3rd one. But for that to be only happening twice in a 2-hour, 10-minute match, it was incredible to me. But the boys, you see, I've got the boys final, happens way more in the boys, that they are, feeling each other out a little bit more in that way.
Yeah, sure. And do you think, my last thing for me on that, on those longer cross court exchanges, do you think they sometimes happen on bigger points when there's a bit more at stake? And because I remember watching that match, I remember seeing one was a really big point, it's like a break point, and Andy was just refusing to not, he was back into Evo's backhand time and time again. Do you think there's a little bit of correlation there?
Definitely. It makes sense. It's like, when you're under pressure, I won't go too much off topic here, but it's a slight bugbear of mine when I hear people say that the best players play their best tennis under the highest pressure. I'm like, do they? It's like the best players play their norms under the pressure. Now, what we see the occasional hot shot that you see on the ATP hot shot of the week or whatever. But those are outliers. The majority of the top players are there for a reason. Their norms are higher and they do their norms under the pressure. So if you think of someone like an Andy, if it's a really big point and he knows that his norms are higher than the opponent's, why is he going to take a risk and change if he knows he could just go into the backhand, wait for a clear opportunity and so on? Of course, if they're hugely confident, then you see slightly different things. But we can't say that the norm for being the best player in the world is you play your best under the most pressure. There's not many humans that could handle that. That's a kind of I suppose a marine type, these kind of Navy SEAL type mentalities. We need to be at our best, but even there, they just go into a standard operating procedure under the pressure, and that for me is a SOP. Standard operating procedure under extreme pressure, cross-court battle, manipulate, wait, look for a clear chance. If you have a different tool, like different games, but even Del Potro does that. Del Potro will do the cross-court battle and wait for the time to pull the trigger. So, yeah, and that would be my thoughts on that.
Yeah. No, thanks, Kris. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Hi, Kris.
Hi.
Right. Just taking you back to the wrong footing presentation.
Yeah.
Essentially, looking at when the person who's under pressure is actually doing their get ready step. So on that path back to the middle, I think when fell over, potentially he didn't do a get ready step and tried to change direction, or did it so late that there was an obvious back behind.
Yeah,
it's a lot of.
Yeah, it's a good point, because if you think of the split step in general, there are two times where you technically don't need to do a split step: when you're in extreme attack or when you're in extreme defense. So if I give an attack example, if someone, say I've opened up the court with my forehand, I'm liking how I'm using myself as the example here. It doesn't happen often, right? So I open up the court against you. You're out wide. I see there's this space down the line. I change direction and speed down the line. I can see that you're going to run with an open racket face. So what I do is I don't need to run to a position and split step or whatever. I just lace that ball, head towards the center line tee, and literally just run to the volley and touch the volley, or hit a drive volley, whatever. Yeah. So I don't need to do the kind of formal split step and see and whatever. I can anticipate and just run through it. The other one in extreme defense is the one you saw. There's no way that Novak is going to waste time to stop and split step, or even do it on a glide step, when he knows that he's going to have to potentially cover that short drop shot and cover the full diagonal of the court. So the split step, again, for those of you who know me, know that my list of bugbears in coaching is quite long, but this whole idea of the split step for me is the most overly taught explicit skill in tennis, and for me the easiest way to let's say change the reframe slightly, not to teach split step, but for players to learn split step, is put them under duress, put them in situations where they need to change direction. In 1987, 88-ish, I used to have arguments with county coaches and national coaches eventually about split step. They'd be telling me to split step in the service boxes when we were patting the ball up and down to each other. Kris, split step, split step. I'm like, why? I don't need to. Put me in a situation where I need to, and I'll do it. But also put me in a situation where I don't need to do it, and I won't do it. Either the ball is coming to me and I'm under no duress, but I wouldn't do that on the match court because I don't know. But on the match court, I would know I don't have time here. I need to put my head down and run. You see the one where Andy will touch his racket on the ground while he's sprinting. Rafa's head down, sprinting. Halep, head down, sprint. They're not thinking, oh, I need to be compliant here. What is it? They've hit the ball. Split step. No, it's just boom, down, head gone. Yeah. So does that answer your question, or?
Yes, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's just knowing when it's not required, and when it's required big time, when you need to adapt it and maybe go a bit earlier if you technically anticipate and so on. Just to add one thing to what Kris was saying there, but the reason I think that it's more common in boys as well, and this is more of a philosophical standpoint, is that boys are much more likely to try and outsmart the opponent. You know, if you look at any practice session at a junior tournament, typically you'll see the boys wanting to play touch and bluff and butts up and jail, all that kind of stuff, you know, like trying to manipulate and outmove the game where you bounce it down before the ball crosses the net, all that. They love that outsmarting each other. It's much more like bantery, kind of camaraderie, sparring against each other. And if you look at the girls, they will typically, because girls are much more task oriented, which I think is a good thing, you will see them doing more diligent practice straight up and down, cross courts, and much more regimental type practice. So I think this is just a theory that the boys are much more likely to kind of try and out chess each other in that cross court, rather than the girls are much more like, what was the patterns that used to call it in the 80s and 90s, I can't remember, but it's like a patterned way of playing, you know, that one cross court, one line, two cross, one line. So I think that's why we see more changes of direction in girls, because they're much more like hit there, hit there, hit there, hit there, where boys are like, excuse my language, but they have a screw you mentality. They kind of like, screw you, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait, I'm going to put you there, they like playing with each other a little bit more. So anyway, right, let's go into the how to train. We've got, so again, for me, this is just about compartmentalizing things. You can call them whatever you like, but in terms of categories of training or drills, I would have dead ball, which is just a hand or a basket feed. So it's just, you take a ball and you feed it out of your hat, or throw it or feed it out of your racket. And you can train so many different ways in that situation. Live ball is rally based, so it's actually when there's send and receive involved. Yeah, and of course you could combine. You could start with a basket feed and block the ball, so it is semi-live. But let's just keep it simple just now. So hand feed, basket feed, rally based, condition point play, or some people call it cooperative point play, which is you're placing the specific skill at the start of the point. Now, the simple reason for that is that you want to place volume on the skill. So if you drilled something really well with a basket, and then maybe even did it in a rally-based situation, and then say, okay, just play, just go play, serve return, just play, the chances are, unless they're really smart when they get to the stage, that they don't see the skill. So you practice something, and it doesn't happen because maybe serve and return is inconsistent, or maybe the serve's too dominant, maybe the return is missed, or maybe the return is too good, or whatever. So I condition the points so that the skill we are practicing is most likely to happen right at the start. Then they can play and problem solve and do what they want. And the final layer, if you like, is serve and return, but that as in open point play. But again, the reality is I'm looking to see now, can you make this happen? Can you, let's say we were doing dominate in the middle, can you make that happen with your serve, right? If you're the returner, can you stop it happening? Can you find a way within 2 or 3 shots of you dominating the middle? So this is very much like, if you think of the horrible example of coaches, and I've done it, I'll be honest and say I've done this when I was in my 20s. You get to this stage of your squad's training and mentally you go, I'm done. You know, I'm finished now. I've done all the hard stuff. Now I can just sit back and watch and enjoy them playing some points. Yeah, that's when your job is still very much to intervene and bring attention and bring focus and so on. So those would be the different ways of how to train. Sorry, slip of the hand there. Go to the keys. In terms of how I would package this, it would be about the kind of drill, will, and skill. And then for me, this is how you set up and run the drill. So it's just, again, human nature is we remember things that rhyme. So drill, will, skill is a way of you thinking about how I'm going to set up and run and work this drill and intervene. So in terms of the drill, it is selling the tactical story first. Yeah, I'll give examples a little bit later on, but you have to contextualize the work that you're doing. You know yourself, the junior players want to play points, they want to play matches. Even if you think of the extreme example of a little kid who's a beginner, one of the first questions will come in, they maybe never even played tennis before. One of the first questions they'll ask is, when are we going to play a match? You know, and it's a horrible reply, but I once heard a parent say to his dad, a parent say to his kid, you couldn't strike a match, son. So it's a horrible kind of riposte, if you like. But that's the reality. If my 6-year-old and I play tennis, he asks me, when are we playing a match? When are we playing a game? So that they're telling us they want to kind of play that. If you take your drill and you kind of place it on the match court mentally, then they're more motivated. They understand the whys of why they're doing it. They can see an exciting future when they'll use this on the match court. In terms of markers and targets, the simple differential is a marker is on your player side of the court, whereas the target's on the other side. And I would encourage you to use, whenever possible and whenever safe and so on, markers and targets. Use them as reference points for recovery. Some you can use them for challenges. I'll maybe share one later on, but it's really about starting positions. You could use them for that. So starting positions, recovery positions, hit locations is for targets. The drill parameters is a massively important one in terms of rep sets and or time. So if you use the analogy of the gym, if I go to the gym and I get a PT session, it would be unthinkable that a physical trainer would give me say a 15-kilogram dumbbell and say, right, just do dumbbell curls without telling me how many. It's unthinkable in that world that they would say, just do it until I'm just going to go have a coffee, or just do it until you can't do it anymore and we'll move on. It's all reps and sets. I think we could bring that mindset a little bit more to the practice court in tennis, not to be more like physical trainers, but to make sure the players know how long something's going to last. You know, if I say to you, right, we're going to do this drill, and you don't know how it's going to last, you just you start compliant, and then after a while you're like, when does it end? I don't know. And that's when you see the ebbs and flows of motivation. You see some people tank it. You see some people get irritated. So I really strongly believe we need to package up and sell and clarify, right, you're going to do 10 in a row of these. So I want to see 100% here. Yeah. If I'm saying, right, you're going to do 50 in a row, therefore you're going to get physically and mentally fatigued. You're not allowed to show it. You've got to keep going. Or it could be, we're going to do this drill for 2 minutes. We're going to break for 30 seconds. We're going to go 2 minutes. Everyone knows what's expected when you set the parameters up in that sense. I always feel obliged to put, is it safe in there? But that for me should be a gimme. But in the context we're talking about, of course, markers, balls on the court, all that stuff. But also from a coaching work to rest ratio, is it safe? I tell this story quite a lot. When I run my last program, my office had a glass window onto the first court, and there was a coach who was what I would call a young jock, great guy, super guy, played tennis to kind of ITF, good level, but he was a jock. He was a gym guy, right? Big macho guy, opposite to me. And the amount of times I would see this player getting run ragged, and he would be stood there, and you could tell by his body language, he was judging the player for not being good. Excuse me. Even worse, you'd see the player do press ups at the end of it because he couldn't do it. So not only was he fatigued because of the drill, excuse me, he would make him do press ups. So time and time again, I would jump on the court from my office. I would take the racket out of his hand, and I would put him down the other end of the court, and then make him do it. And he was played to a very, very good level. And after 20, 30 balls, he was goosed. And I said, well, why you want him to do another 30 or 40? It's ridiculous. So for me, that's not safe. And I don't mean, of course, they could get injured, they could do whatever. I mean, in terms of coaching principles, it's not a safe thing to do. It's not healthy. You're not helping the player unless you say occasionally, let's see if you can hit until you drop. You know, you might do that every now and again. Oh, I'm getting duplications here. Let me just go. I think I've maybe taken a copy. Apologies. Taken a copy of a presentation. Let me do this. Sorry, 2 seconds. Yeah. All right. Can you still see my screen? Give me a thumbs up if you can see all. No, right. Okay, so share again. Right. Let's see, I picked the right one. So I've obviously made a copy of a presentation and used that one. So the orders jumped about. There we go. Right. Again. Right. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So apologies. So Will, in terms of this is really about, and now clarifying here, this is not a stage. This is you do all of this at the same time, so that you're engaging the performer while you're selling the drill. Yeah, but you are really getting into the head, heart, and athlete of the player. So in simple terms, it's up to us, in my opinion, to place the performance focus. Yeah, I get slightly irritated with shot caller that when coaches say, "Oh, the player's not focused," and well, what, have you given them a focus? And then, well, no. Well, so you're just relying on them being focused. But in tennis, the player's always focused. It's just they might be focused on the wrong thing. It could be they're focused on the mistake they've just made, and you say they're not focused. Well, they are focused. They're just focused in the past. Yeah, they've gone back into their part of their brain where you actually recall experiences. So we have to place our focus, and that's why it's so important to set it up well, but also be ready to intervene. If you want to use a good analogy, it's like bumper bowling. When a drill is going on, we are the bumper bowling. We know what their objectives are. They know what their objectives are. They've taken the ball. We're not holding it with them. They're performing. And if you sense that they're about to go in the gutter, you kind of go, hey, 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 metaphorically, an intervention, a recue, a refocus word. It could be you stop the drill and refocus it because they're going in the gutter two or three times in a row, and you place the focus back. It could also be in terms of how well they're problem solving in the moment when they get into the more points-based stuff. In terms of heart, it's just pure challenge, tapping into their pride, their resilience, their determination, their ability to bounce forwards, if you want to use that expression. In terms of athletically, ensuring not that they're just physically ready, but that they're at their best throughout. And I alluded to it a minute ago. This is the sort of thing you can start to add to your kind of values of, or a code of conduct, maybe, I'm not sure it would be in a code of conduct, but a values type document that you could have in a program where you actually are saying, look, one of our values is that we take pride in ourselves during the drills. So it might be that the rule is, while the drill or the point is going on, we never show that we're physically fatigued. You know, you see some players where the longer the drill goes on, you can see the body language, the racket starts touching the ground, they get raggedy with their technique. We never do that. And if when the point is over, you could say you're allowed to do whatever you want. But I would always try and take it back a step. So let me see if I can articulate this. Let's take an extreme example. If the player wants to fall to their knees or the hands and knees and, you know, just be dying, if they want to do that, then they take it back a stage and they stand with their hands on their legs. So they show the better version of what they actually want to do. Take it on. If they want to put, like, show that they duck down and put their hands on their knees, they stand tall. If they want to, if their temptation is to breathe really, really, really heavy, they try and control that centered breath. If their temptation is they want to, they don't want to see the opponent, they don't want to show the opponent that they're taking that lungs full of air, they turn away and they do it to the other end of the court. Then you can start to put things into pre-point routines that people are so mad about. But for me, it's the mentality of, I will bust my gut here, and I will be damned if I show you that I'm struggling. The point's over. You might see something, but I will always be trying to hide it as much as I can. Yeah. In terms of skill, again, it might be overly obvious, but we need to make sure they're clear on what skills are being challenged, that we are ready to bring attention to the key areas, whatever it is, whether it be the trajectory of the ball, the positioning, you know, where they're using the appropriate technique for a tactical situation, etc. So that's our job. Sell, package it up, and then be ready to intervene as we go on. Excuse me. So I like how I face away there, but I've got a microphone in my ear, so apologies if you just had your eardrum burst there. I thought I would give a quick example of one of the 7. So I've used dominate in the middle because it's quite standard. And this is an overview of 4 drills you could do. I don't want to spend too much time looking at this slide because I'll unpack it as we go on, but that would be a simple way you could really show an overview of one of the skills that you're going to do. But this is going into the more nitty-gritty. So I've written it deliberately, so it's almost like I'm speaking to a player. I wouldn't say it verbatim the way it's written on the screen, because I would add emotion, I would add more tone, or maybe add some analogies or whatever to it, but you'll get the essence from it. So the tactical story is, you've opened up the court with your serve. It could be you recall a match. So I watched you at the end. You were opening up the court with your serve a lot there. Your opponent was returning deep up the middle. And I want you to take more delight in systematically destroying them side to side. And I might throw in that the dog with a toy. Be like dog, you know, just taking pride in seeing them getting rugged side to side. With your serve, your opponent would be stupid to not return up the middle, because your serve is so good. That is the big, they're going to do that 90% of the time. So this is a big thing for you to work on. I want to challenge your ability to dominate consistently from the middle of the court. So you're selling the kind of concept. They can see an exciting future where they're going to be moving the opponent side to side after the serve. Drill 1, I'm going to be on the baseline. You're going to start each attempt, not each attempt, each start of the drill in the arabesque, which is the finishing position of the serve, inside the baseline. Not every ball, every time they do the drill. You got to hit the outside third of the court 30 times, and you've got 3 lives. If you lose all your lives, we start again, but you've only got 3 attempts. Now, I would say and do all of those top 2 columns while gesturing or demoing the drill, right? And I would add, look, this is going to really challenge you. When you get to like 20 balls, you might start to feel fatigue in the legs. The lungs might start to burn. It might be you get distracted. You get irritated if you miss or lose a life. It might be your technique starts to get a little bit raggedy. I want to really test you. I want you to enjoy being tested. Yeah, I'll be there to refocus you, and I'll champion if I think you need to be picked up at any time. And that will typically happen probably between 20 and 30 balls. If I'm championing, and again, another bugbear, when you see the coach running it and it's like from ball 1, come on, come on, come on, a minute, and it sounds like the horse racing commentary. And you're like, whoa, I cannot even focus. I'm just hearing white noise. So, you know, intervene when you need to, but don't feel you need to talk the whole way through. In terms of the skill, I would maybe sell the shape trajectory. I want you to shape the ball so you can repeat with quality. You don't need to go near the lines. You've got 2-3 feet, you know, either side, not either side, inside the line to put the ball. When you get the opportunity, I want you to jump and turn. I want you to really release on the ball. But there might be times when I feed you a challenging ball and you might have to adapt and use more just the forearm, or it might be that you have to just stay low and work with the speed that I give you, or you might have to pivot back, etc., etc. So this for me is why it's so important that we sell the drill and set it up in such a way that the player goes on the court and they're 100% clear on what is expected of them. That does most of the learning for you, and that frees you up to then add value. So you will hear examples of, you know, drills being set up badly and then it's like you've got to go in and save the day. Avoid all of that. Be clear with the player on what is expected of them. Tactical story remains the same. Drill 2 is live ball, so it's 1 against 2. So you're going to have the 2 players in the corner. You're going to be dominating from the middle, but now you must recover to the correct position laterally or side to side. You've still got to hit the outside thirds. You don't have to alternate. You could hit the same ball, same side twice in a row, but no 3 times in a row. You've got to hit 4 balls in a row to get your 1 point. How many points can you score in 2 minutes? And I might be doing this as I'm gesturing it, at least gesturing, shadowing, maybe even dropping a ball. And then maybe if I had players, I would demonstrate it and talk at the same time. We all know that's a challenging one to do. If you see your man, the body coach that's doing all the PE at home, he is so tired when he's doing exercises, and I'm doing the exercises, and I'm like, I'm not tired. Why is he tired? He's having to speak and do the exercises. It knocks your breathing out of control. So that's a skill that we need to practice as coaches, is verbalizing while demonstrating and showing. In terms of the extra challenge from that drill, you're going to have 2 players hitting to you. It's not me feeding from a basket, so it puts a sparring element on it. So you're going to have to really get your pride in check, respect the incoming ball, disrespect it if you really need to. In terms of the skill, now I'm looking more at the decision making about when you decide to go back to the same side twice, or if you don't. I'm also checking that you're positioning well and your shot selection within that. Drill 3, condition point play. So just to keep it close to that last one, you're going to do the same thing in a row, but after you hit the second ball, you're going to play against the player that receives that second ball. So you've got to hit 3 in a row before the point becomes live, but the player that you hit to the second time is the one that you're going to play with. If you fail, you lose the point. So what I mean by that is if it goes up in the middle or it goes out in the net, etc., you lose the point. Yeah. So it's just setting that scene about they're going to have to really be focused. Really challenge that head in terms of the focus, the 3 balls in a row. Do they start to push the 3 balls, or do they actually still release on it? How do they cope with the scoring system, etc.? And then only additional thing I'd be looking at is how well they maintain momentum if they get to, let's say, 3 balls, point becomes live, and now I'm playing. Do they lapse back in and become passive, or do they keep their foot on the gas? Drill 4, just to use a serve, is, and I've slightly conditioned this one. I've said that, well, no, in fact, I've actually just said on this one, they can use their serve to create the opportunity, but the condition might be they have to serve wide. Yeah. So they've got to serve wide and look to dominate the middle. So again, this is about them now bringing their match court persona to the court, that it should look like it's a match. It should, the decisions being made should replicate exactly what they would do under pressure on the match court. How well do you set it up? How composed are you on ball 3, etc.? So in terms of how you're running it, I've alluded to it already. You all have unbelievable amount of experience. I think there were 35 people signed up. Let's say there's 25 of you on the call. It might be that between the 25 of you, you have 400 to 500 years of coaching experience. So you have subconsciously developed a bank of experience, which allows you to forecast what could happen in certain training situations. Yeah, so that means that even without running the drill, we could predict what might happen. Now, this is what, the reason I say that is you've got all that bank of experience in your memory. You now have to have your eyes peeled to see what is happening. That's when the coaching really begins. Yeah, all the other stuff is facilitation and selling. Now you're coaching. So the players are doing it. So for example, are they trying too hard or playing too safe? That's a common thing in all of these drills. Do they start to play with just their arm? Do they stop using their legs? Do they space themselves accordingly for the inside out, or do they stay square to the net and just nudge it inside out? Do they have the appropriate racket rhythm when they're hitting the ball, or are they kind of constant with their rhythm because they're getting tight or physically fatigued? Are they positioning correctly? Are they recovering correctly? Are they starting to get irritable? You know, you're looking for those You know, that's the thing. Again, the bumper bowling. So you're looking for it. The key thing is that we need to intervene in a timely manner, and also our interventions, no matter how big or small, must bring added value. So, for example, in some people, they define an intervention where you stop everything. If you say something to a player that distracts them, because that could be what it is, your intention is to refocus. So, but that the reality is you've distracted them. That's an intervention. So if you are training and I say the word spark at contact, I'm intervening in some way. It just means I don't stop the drill. I expect you to carry on and just take the word and carry on and play and improve the performance. Yeah. If I say athletic height, stay low, don't come up for air, stay low, stay strong, whatever. These are all interventions, and I'm trying to add value. So that's my plea to coaches, is make sure that everything, if it's possible, that you say is adding value to the player. So I think, yeah, we've just kind of encapsulated that in a diagram. You know, I won't go through all of this, but this is the building blocks, if you like, of the drill, will, and skill. Tactical story, start, where do they move to, recover, etc. Are they focused on what the task is or the skills being worked on? Of course, is it safe? The reps, times, and so on. Are they motivated? They're ready physically? But this one here, this is a question that you could ask yourself once the drill starts. Am I ready now? Am I ready to analyze and intervene whenever I need to? And I'm not judging coaches, but that's a typical thing that could happen, is you set the drill up. And that's why if you hear the expression, the game does the teaching for you. So Judy and I would use that a lot in the work that we do at the foundation. I'm encouraging us now to say the game, if it's done well, the game does the majority of the learning for you, and it frees you up to add value by teaching or adding anything to it, and so on. So, because the definition or the interpretation sometimes is, oh, well, if the game does all the teaching for you, I just need to set the game up. If the drill does all the teaching for you, I just need to set the drill up. That's the starting point. That creates this implicit learning environment. Then we go on top and say, right, refocus here, attention to detail here, attitude, stop, right, okay, take a breather, refocus, maybe get a few hand feeds out, then they go again. Yes, right, let's put it back into the drill. Those are the interventions that we're looking for. So I think that's pretty much, oh, that's, no, you don't need that, that's for another person. Let me get the original one that I had up. I think I've probably come out. So I've just got my contact details if any of you want to get in touch. Check it's this one. It's a reminder to myself not to copy presentations 10 minutes before. Share. Bet this goes into this. Yeah, same again. One more second. There, right. So those are my contact details, but I'm more than happy to spend a few minutes clarifying anything that you, any thoughts, feelings, you know, give me feedback, etc. But if you want to do it afterwards, these are my contact details. So any questions from anyone? I suppose more, it could reflect further on the first bit, or more about the how to train. Typically, I get less questions on that one because it's maybe not as sexy as the first bit, but it's important, and how you train. And you could use those principles for any tactic, any situation. But I want to provide principles rather than just this is the exact drill that you would do. And you know, because just go on Instagram if you want that. You know, I'm amazed how many people are like, here's a great drill to improve racket head speed, and it'll be the one where they just throw the ball up and they smack it really hard. I went, is that really a great drill to for racket head speed. Yeah, okay, maybe it is, maybe it's not, but there's not much sophistication or thought there. The best one is when you see the baby sitting in the shopping trolley of balls and they chucking balls out for their mum or dad to hit. I use that one now. Say, look, a baby can do it. So it's not really a drill if a baby can do it. Yeah, as a coach, we want to bring a bit more sophistication to our drilling. So, any thoughts or questions?
Kris, just a thought, I guess, and based on experience of some of these drills, especially when there can be, like you said in your example, kind of 3 players on the court, it's easy to perhaps focus on the player who's kind of at the forefront of the drill, the one that's dominating the middle. In this instance, the whole story is around them, what they're doing to their opponent, and I guess it's just a reminder, and I have to remind myself this all the time, that there are other players on the court on the receiving end of the pattern, and I guess just ensuring that the story's sold to them and they're motivated to kind of be on the other end of that, and what it can how it can benefit them, and being ready to intervene at both ends of the court for all players. And I guess it's just something like that's just jumped into my mind, really.
Definitely, 100%. I think you might have come in just a little bit after we talked about that, but I talked about it. Excuse me. It's so important to address both sides of the coin. So even excuse me, the mentality of being someone's sparring partner. So I'm always fascinated by the mindset of, I don't know what you call them. Is it the people in the peloton or whatever, where they're the ones that are the pacers and they sacrifice themselves. They're never going to win the Tour de France. They're the ones that just sacrifice to help set the pace for the team, and then they drop out. You sometimes even get it in athletics where within the same country, one athlete in the country will be the pace setter for the person who's going to win the gold. Yeah, I'm fascinated by that mindset. I struggle with it, if I'm honest, but it's just me personally. But that could happen what you're saying, Kris, is bang on, because it could happen in that situation. The players go, what? So I'm sacrificing my practice time so they can just practice dominating from the middle. And then you go, right, yeah, but everyone's going to get equal opportunity to practice that. And you go, yeah, but now, as you say, you're wasting an opportunity. So you need to work the other side as well. So if it's a 2-against-1 drill where they have to hit 4 in a row to get 1 point, you even just by saying, look, guys, or players, don't be nice. Smack, if he doesn't hit well or she doesn't hit well, smack it up the middle, slice it low, take pleasure, because there's going to be times where you're going to have to play the ball out of this corner and try and put your opponent in a situation to stop them dominating, but it might be too risky to go near the lines. So hit the low slice, shape the ball, smack the odd one up the middle. But the other thing you can simply do is every 2 shots, they have to change position. So you're addressing that. It could be you have to respect the up and back positioning. So the 2 players there, like, hey, come on, pause. And I use that a lot. It's almost like using gaming terms. So you pause the game and you say, right, okay, where is he? He's about to hit a big ball mid-court. Where are you? You're 1 foot from the baseline. Get yourself back there. You maybe put a marker down and say, right, you got to get there. You can turn that into a competition about they score a point if they readjust their up and back positioning and so on. But you're bang on. It's so important, because every drill you can do, if there's 2 players, you've got 2 sides of the coin. They're going to experience both sides of those coins in the match. So there's an opportunity to double up your training. Any other questions or feedback? I'll stop this. I'd like to see your faces. It's always a bit, it always feels a bit easier when I can see you. But yeah, any other thoughts, questions? Could be anything. There's no such thing as a silly question. Unless it's, where do I buy my shampoo?
Kris, I guess I'm also thinking of I mean, at a sort of a high performance level, when you've got a lot of court space, you've got 2 or 3 players on the court, this sort of stuff, when you're talking about moving the opponent and setting up the drills, is, you've the world's your oyster, really, what you want to do. I guess I'm thinking for coaches who are you know, working with younger players, 8, 9 years old, lots of more bodies on the court, and I guess some reflections from you in terms of how to still develop some of the skills that underpin these things without being able to go to sort of what looks like the finished product almost of the cups we've seen today.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're thinking about, let's say, mini tennis, or I think it's now going to be called youth tennis or whatever, but if you think of the red, orange, and green, in theory, if they're using the right ball and court size and racket size and whatever, they should be able to cooperate to a similar level. So the principles are all the same, but it's just maybe the quality of what they're doing is not so good. I think those first 4 that we talked about earlier on would be your diet. You know, like if a young player cannot, to be honest, I think it applies right the way through the levels in the juniors. You know, this idea of cross-court rally with recovery, for me, is like absolute coaching 101, but so important. And it can be a very strong indicator. If I think back to even 1985, when I first started playing, I remember the club that I played at had a top court, and it was literally slightly higher up. And a naive starter in tennis was watching 2 of the existing best juniors in the club. And in my mind, the ball was just going like this. And of course, when I'm playing, the ball's going up, it's going over the fence, it's going down and I was like, how is it possible they can hit like this? And now, if you take that on to what we've done, this won't translate. Maybe it will if I use my fingers like this. If this is the cross-court diagonal, that you're hitting that, you're hitting that tempo. But the idea is the players are moving in unison. If I do it this way. So I move out and hit, you recover. I move out and hit. So even those little simple things, I would try and get into mini red players. And it might be the technique is push. So I push it cross court, I recover. They push it cross court, they recover. And then over time, you start to try and get them to maybe follow through a little bit more or add more mechanics when it's needed and so on. But essentially what I would take and break it right down is exactly the same principles, but just be mindful that the ways they're going to do it are not going to look like what we saw between Brenda and Clervy. Now, if some of you are now sitting thinking, it's like, well, look, my players can't even rally, then it's clear you have to get them to be able to rally, but you can still do things like floor tennis where they're changing direction on the floor. It's a good way of selling the hitting zone and the wrist position and all that, the body position. You can do all those things like cross-court rally, change direction. You could even do the principle of X pattern or drop shot just by rolling it softly and then hitting it into the other corner. It's like the equivalent of air hockey, but on the ground with tennis rackets. So you can be quite manipulative in a healthy way and get the principles to come out. You could do it throwing, catching and throwing, you know, like with sandwich catch between the racket and the hand and so on. So I hope that answers the question in some way. But yeah, that's a skill of us as coaches, is to be able to adapt to what we've got in front of us.
Yeah, no.
Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts or questions? No. So you've got my contact details. If you want to get in touch, and you know, if something comes to you later on, email me or send me a message on whatever, Facebook or Insta, and yeah, more than happy to answer any questions at any time.
Great. Thank you so much, Kris. That was fantastic. I filled up my notebook substantially, so I'll be going back to that, and I'll grab you for the presentation as well to send on, and I press record, so we've got this for the people who couldn't make it. But thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant. Yeah, perfect. Just one thing, obviously you'll have the presentation in terms of recording. Thanks, Ian. I'll send you a PDF. I can't send you the clips because they don't belong, like they're Tennis Europe clips and whatever. Sure. So I'll send you the PDF so you have all the text, but if you've got the recording, then you can see the videos on there as well. But excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time again. Let's hope that we see each other on a court soon. There's one thing that we will be so grateful for, you know, is face-to-face
opportunities. So I hope to see you in person at some point later in the year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks
Thank you.
very much, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.